So this is what is happening on European level, national level, now micro level or study program perspective. How we use ECTS for that. And here, as I said, we have two main elements: student workload and learning outcomes. These should lead to credit, because what is the use to calculate workload if we don't know where are we going? Learning outcomes are taking us somewhere. They're taking to final qualification and to the student we want to see. And how the credits are applied. And this should lead to transparency and quality assurance of the program. So student workload, I don't need to repeat that to you, is indication of the time the student needs to complete all the learning activities, while learning outcomes are statements of what the learner is expected to know, understand, and be able to do. I'll go to learning outcomes a bit later. And they are expressed through competence. If we're talking about student workload, again, you know very well this formula. We have 1 year full-time studies, 60 credits, and as we estimate in Europe, it's from 1,500 to 1,800. So it gives us a credit of approximately 25-30 hours per credit. So, but workload, calculation of workload is not as simple and straightforward as that. And it's affected by very many, elements and environment. What learning outcomes we want to achieve, teaching methods, assessment methods, cultural differences, peculiarities, and so on and so forth. And important factor is not only how we calculate, but how the students understand it, how they perceive how much they are asked to work. So the students, if you ask, and researchers have shown that if you ask the student to consult a lot of sources, he or she will perceive workload as much more difficult than it really is. It affects the atmosphere in the classroom, with his classroom mates, with teachers, and so on and so forth. There are many, many factors to consider. Again, as a rule, we tend to, when you calculate workload, we tend to think in terms only how much to read, it could be even pages, what to do, and so on and so forth. But students need time to reflect. And think even of yourself, if you have to do or write an article or whatever, reading on it is not enough. You have to internalize what you've done in order to produce something new, right? So this is the same. So suggestion would be, when calculating workload, to rely on a normal working week. At least we do it in our country, and say, okay, if our week is 40 hours, we should calculate the student should work about 40 hours as well per week. So it leads us to, for the sake of arithmetic, so modularization to 160 hours a month. Now, competences and learning outcomes. This is something, we struggle with. I said, textbook notion, and we go through and through and through how to differentiate, and especially when we describe and we design a program. And I'm relying here, there are a lot of descriptions on a lot of competences and learning outcomes. And when we look at what CEDEFOP has developed, there are slight differences in how we understand and how we apply these things. However, we're relying on what ECTS users go and said, and what has been tested through the tuning projects. So competences for us in our context, higher education context, Bologna context, would be a dynamic combination of cognitive, metacognitive skills, knowledge and understanding, interpersonal, intellectual and practical skills, ethical values and attitudes. This is a competence. Now, learning outcomes, as I said, is a statement what the learner can do, whatever, sorry, I cannot see here already, understand, do after the process of learning. So, what is the difference between these two? First of all, competencies are dictated by job market and societal needs. We have to know what is needed. And I think some things we were discussing during the first session touched upon that. And competence is a property of the student. The student might bring into the classroom a certain level of competence. The program has to develop them further. And after the process of learning, the student takes these competences back. It does not stay. while learning outcomes are statements. That is a property, kind of property of the study program. It's expressed through competences. Learning outcomes, actually, they show the level of the competence we have to develop, we want to develop, and show the requirements that the students, in order to get the credit. They are formulated by academic staff, and they have to be tested. That's crucial and very important thing. And here, maybe it will be better, of course, with the example. I took the Bachelor of History Generic Competence, which is awareness as a competence, awareness of the connections between present-day issues and the past. It's a competence. I am aware of it, okay? And translating into one of the learning outcomes, this competence could be that after the learning process, student is able to describe historiographic tendencies of the last 20 years and to identify the major axes in the debate about modernity, postmodernity, about globalization, and the related understanding of the relationship between the world's people. As you see, learning outcome brings in an element of content, you know, of what we have to do. And this is, again, very important. And this thing already can be tested, right? Now, credit allocation. I'm sure, again, we went through this guide and know it and discuss that in time as well. First of all, the most important thing, it's very difficult, or practically, I would say maybe even impossible to get all the elements, all these puzzle things right for the first time. We have to be prepared for the process, a very long process. And there is no direct link, as you know, between contact hours and credits. Of course, there is some link, but not direct one. And a number of credits do not relate to importance or prestige of the course. And this is the two most important departure points. And there are several ways of allocate credits. Maybe there are more, and I'm sure there are, but first of all, bottom-up, top-down, and comparative. So bottom-up, when we define learning outcomes, for each component, activities foreseen, we gather all the information, we look at them, you know, all the proposals from the teachers, estimate workload, and express that in credits. So this is a kind of course unit system where, you know, teachers have more freedom to say, okay, I want to teach, this has to be taught. So it may be very favorable and like by the teachers. Top-down approach is when we have a predefined number of credits for the course unit, and credits are allocated to components, and then we see what learning outcomes, what activities we can do in the allocated time, how we have to rationalize the whole module, you know, of course unit, and fit everything together. And standard, usually it's a standard credit. It's either 5, 10, 50, or multiple, so to say. And
excuse me.
yes.
Just a bit.
Okay. Enter. Where is enter? I don't. Okay.
I'm not sure that you should press enter on your keyboard. You should have a remote control for projectors.
Where is remote control for the project, I wonder? Does anybody have it? Okay, but I can carry on with the last. So we have staff decide on what components should be given the same number of credits or the same or time. And then define learning activities again on basis of that time, and after gathering some data information, they can compare and say, okay, here we get right and here we get wrong, and then we have to adjust something. Now, here I put it 10 steps for designing programs. This is the tuning approach, and it's again a new philosophy, ECTS philosophy. First of all, we need to determine need and potential of the program. Do we need it? And can we introduce it? Can we develop it? Then we have to define profile and competences. First of all, competences. What competences we want to foster? I'm not saying to develop completely from the zero. Want to foster with our student with the program. Then, from competences, we formulate learning outcomes. What competences, at what stage, at what level we develop. We have to